Hey guys, Trip here, and it's Morrowind time. I feel like it's been forever since we've talked about the Elder Scrolls, and there's a good reason for that. But before we go any further, I should let you guys know that I'm getting over a cold right now, so sorry in advance if I sound a bit more stuffy in this video. But there was no way I was passing up on the chance to talk about this. See, I've made no secret in the past that I've kind of fallen out of love with the Elder Scrolls. Personally, I prefer the version of Tamriel described in the early 2000s, where everything was a bit more nuanced, fantastical, and unique. It's sad to say, but somewhere along the way, the Elder Scrolls just lost its magic, becoming more grounded, straightforward, and, dare I say, generic. I've talked about this a lot on my channel, so if you want to know more, check out some of my older videos on the subject. But what if I told you my ideal version of Tamriel not only still exists, but is still being expanded upon, improving upon the design philosophy of the original game while staying true to its original spirit? Enter Project Tamriel, and its sister project Tamriel Rebuilt. These mods share a common goal: to recreate the world of Tamriel as it was described in the Elder Scrolls 3. I've been following these mods for many years now, and I can say without exaggerating that these are some of the greatest mods ever conceived. The amount of content in these mods is staggering. New environments, new characters, new questlines, new dungeons, new factions to join. Every few years we get a new region to explore, from the westernmost reaches of Skyrim to the eastern wizard city of Portel Vanis. Abecean Shores, Project Tamriel's most recent release, takes place along the western coast of Cyrodiil, a province that's much different in this era from its portrayal in later games. Now, you might be wondering why the lore of a 20-year-old game matters to me so much. Well, let me break it down. When it comes to video games, I'm all about exploration and world building. The Elder Scrolls was my first exposure to an open-world fantasy world, a living environment with its own culture, society, and ecosystem. So these are the kinds of mods that even an Elder Scrolls cynic like myself can't help but get excited for. I could talk about these mods all day, but this world is made to be explored. So today we're going on an adventure. Let's travel from Morrowind to Cyrodiil as we uncover the lore of the Abecean Shores. Of course, we're just going over the basics today. Let me know in the comments if you want more lore related to modded Morrowind. Trust me, there's a lot. The mod takes place along the Strident Coast, in the southwestern corner of Cyrodiil. Here stands the Kingdom of Anvil, a melting pot of the Western world under the watchful eye of the Imperial Navy. In this timeline, Cyrodiil is a land of jungles, swamps, mountains, and Mediterranean coasts. It's a land of 1,000 cults, from the 9 great faiths to the 16 acceptable blasphemies. It's a nation defined by its diversity, from the Colo-Nordic lords of the west to the deep-wood Niben tribes of the far east, to the sophisticated Minotaur living far from prying eyes. Cyrodiil is a land of many cultures and creeds, held together by an almost religious adherence to the rule of law. After all, the Empire is law, and the law is sacred. In Cyrodiil, the people are divided into 2 broadly defined cultures: the Colovians of the west, whose lifestyle is drawn from the Nords and Redguards, and the Nibenese of the east, who are a melting pot of Nedic, Elven, and Akaviri culture. Generally speaking, Colovians are the sailors and soldiers of Cyrodiil, while the Nibenese serve as mages, priests, and merchants. Together, their lands comprise the modern nation of Cyrodiil, from which they dominate the wider world. This depiction of the Empire is much more flawed than its portrayal in Oblivion and Skyrim. Much like the Imperium of Man from Warhammer, the Third Empire is a shambling husk of its former glory, mired in a morass of bureaucracy, incompetence, and abject cynicism. Despite the Empire's claims of equality under the law, it's ultimately an empire built on human imperialism and the notion that no other species has the right to self-determination. This reality fuels discontent among the elves and beastfolk, who claim they were doing just fine before Talos arrived and butchered their ancestors. In fact, it's widely believed their provinces would rebel if given the chance. Meanwhile, the current emperor, Uriel VII, is old, sick, and dying. His sons are suspected by the masses of being Daedric doppelgangers manipulating the throne from behind the scenes. This conspiracy has led to a series of deadly riots across the Imperial city, brutally suppressed by the Imperial Watch. Suffice to say, the Empire is in dire straits. It's a powder keg waiting to explode. Everyone knows it will, but nobody knows when or how. Today we travel to the very edge of this gilded regime, to the western shores of Colovia and the ancient kingdom of Anvil. Anvil stands watch against the predations of the Abecean Sea, a haven for pirates of various cultures. From Colo-Nordic sea raiders to Redguard swashbucklers to Altmeri corsairs, the Abecean is a lawless sea of scum and villainy. But it's also a major trade artery for the continent, and a melting pot for the various cultures of southwestern Tamriel. On the Abecean shores, it's not uncommon to see high elf merchants peddling their alien wares to Redguard adventurers, or a clan of wandering wood elves dressed in ceremonial bone armor. Walking the streets of Anvil, one may start to believe the Empire's propaganda, its illusion of a harmonious, globalized society united under the rule of law. But make no mistake, this peace is held together by threat of violence. A Pax Cyrodiilica, if you will. This has always been the Colovian way, after all, and they proudly serve as guardians of this enforced peace. Indeed, it's impossible to talk about Anvil without first discussing its primary inhabitants, the Colovians of Western Cyrodiil. Colovians are the stalwart defenders of the Empire. They trace their heritage to Nordic mercenaries who conquered the Western Front in the name of the Elysian Empire. Even today, thousands of years later, Colovians see themselves as conquerors and pioneers. A rather authoritarian people, Colovians quickly fall in line under a strong leader. But when such a leader is absent, they tend to fight amongst themselves and the wider empire. As a result, the history of Colovia is rife with civil unrest, and it takes a strong emperor to keep the Western lords in check. Colovian society is largely dominated by the Colo-Nordic lords, descendants of the ancient mercenaries who conquered Colovia in the name of humanity. The Colo-Nords consider themselves guardians of Cyrodiil, and they have close ties to the military's officer class. Colo-Nords are classically heroic figures. They rule from their austere cliff fortresses, decorated only by the banners of their clans. They're chivalrous, fearless, and pragmatic. In other words, Colo-Nords are the ideal Colovian man. Man in the human sense, of course. But all isn't well with these fabled warrior kings. It's an open secret that the Colo-Nords are bad with money, and many of them are forced to sell their land to either private companies or the Imperial Curia. This relative poverty weakens their influence and invites exploitation by the more shrewd members of the Imperial Court. Colo-Nords are seen by some as relics of an outdated past, as nobles cosplaying ancient warriors while their estates crumble around them. But as is often the case, Anvil is the exception to the rule. While the Colo-Nords mostly stick to the Northern Highlands, the residents of Anvil have their own political structure. Unlike most Colovian kingdoms, Anvil is a center of commerce for the Western world. So much so that it's quite literally a plutocracy. We talk about those a lot on this channel, don't we? The monarch of Anvil is elected based on their personal wealth, in a tradition known as the Royal Auction. During the auction, the richest citizens of Anvil gather at the harbor on ceremonial skiffs. From dawn till dusk, they bid on the monarchy itself. As the sun sets, the highest bidder receives the trident crown, and the bid goes to the kingdom's treasury. In this way, the monarch proves their devotion to the kingdom, as well as their ability to manage Anvil's complex economy. The current Queen of Anvil is Malona Conamoris. By all accounts, Queen Malona is a competent and popular ruler, but there were those that questioned her legitimacy. It was her husband, after all, King Claudius, who won the royal auction, making him the rightful monarch. But Claudius has been missing for years, and the nobles are growing restless. There are ambitious families and corporations who would certainly benefit from a new, rightfully appointed monarch on the throne. The Queen, or more properly the Queen Regent, has so far stood firm against these attacks on her legitimacy. Meanwhile, the king's second wife, Cyrodiil, has never gotten over her husband's disappearance and her sudden loss of power in the royal court. She may have her own part to play in the kingdom's intrigue, but for now her plans are anyone's guess. This is just one of many stories across the kingdom of Anvil and the wider region of the Abecean shores. In other words, we're barely scratching the surface of this mod's lore. Cyrodiil is a vast and ancient land, with a history spanning thousands of years. Who knows what secrets lie off the beaten path, beyond the palaces and politics of imperial high society? We've only just arrived in Anvil after all. There's plenty more for us to discover. If you'd like, we could wander the alleys of Little Orenthia, looking for trouble and opportunity in Anvil's roughest neighborhood. The Mages Guild is always looking for help. Word has it that Tissia, the guild's steward, is recruiting mages to vanquish the undead legions of the Cameron Usurper. While we're hunting undead across the countryside, we might run across a wanted criminal and collect their bounty. If that's too dangerous, we could always try our luck at the gambling halls and play a game of 9 holes. Don't worry, I'll teach you how to play. Or why not get a drink at one of the local pubs and get to know the regulars? If we make the right friends, we might even encounter a subversive book club, spreading conspiracies and dissent against the Empire. But these are stories for another time. If you want to know more about Cyrodiil, the regions, the people, the intrigue, and the mysteries, let me know in the comments. When it comes to modded Morrowind, there's always something to talk about. But in the meantime, I have a kingdom to explore. I'll see you guys in the next one.